I am really, really excited to be here and just kind of backstage really enjoying everyone else's talk. And I think there's already a theme. And the theme is, being a little bit more vulnerable, being up here, talking a little bit more about our own stories, and frankly, a lot of the mistakes that many of us, including me, have made over the years. So I want to share with you guys a little bit about my own journey as a designer and the 11 years that I've spent at Facebook. And a lot of how my own thinking and evolution about what it is I'm meant to do as a designer, working on what I work on. And a lot of that is also just what does it mean to design for people at scale? What are we actually trying to do? So my story goes all the way back in 1998. And here's a picture of me. I am in 8th grade, about to go and get on the scary, high school world. And one of my favorite hobbies at the time was illustration. I had a best friend, her name is Marie, and together, the two of us, every day after school, would be in our sketchbooks and drawing. And what we would love to draw was anime at the time, which was very, very hard to really get a hold of because it was in Japan and we were in Houston. And so the way that we got into it was actually the internet. When we discovered the internet, it was all about going and finding other artists who could inspire our work and help us do better. And so one day, I went over to Marie's house after school, and she says, "You will not believe what I found." I was like, what? And she was like, how we've been trying to do this digital art stuff and we've been using MS Paint? Well, I found this, PaintShop Pro 4. And I was like, oh my God, what is this? And she's like, no, you haven't even seen what this can do. And then she showed me the gradient tool. And I was like, oh my God, I've never seen this before. This is a whole new level. You can just do this with the click of a mouse, And so started our journey into digital art and that being the thing that we did every day after school. And every couple of months, we would discover a new thing, in that community. There'd be a new treasure box we would discover and we'd open it. And this one was also super, super exciting. Lens flare. When I first got Photoshop, this was the feature, because I'd seen other artists using this, that I coveted the most. And so through that whole high school experience, we really got into digital illustration. And we would do a bunch of artwork that looked like this, and we would have tutorials. And this was also a time when a teacher of ours that we were very close to was like, well, why don't you guys go and share this stuff online? Why don't you learn HTML? It's not so hard. See, you just put a little tag and brackets, and you guys should go and share this stuff. And that's actually how I first became a designer, although I didn't know it at the time, because I started to design web pages. And I started to use it to learn the latest tips and tricks, where we would feature our artwork, and this is a super early version, and then every 2 months we would redesign it, and then we'd redesign it. And then there's the gingerbread man, and Halloween, it would get all spooky. And then in the winter, it would be snow theme. All the way into trying out all of the new techniques we were learning with frames and CSS and downloading new fonts. And for me, this was what design was. It was a way for me to express myself, try out and be what am I feeling today? What style do I want to play with? And put that out in the world. And then I got my first job as a real designer, and this was at Facebook. And this was back in 2006. How many of you guys remember this first version of Facebook? Okay, not that many. Well, anyways, there was a creepy little dude in the corner kind of looking at you. And so, I remember actually one of, the first couple months on the job, I had done some design work, and, I was sharing it with Facebook's first designer at the time. His name was Aaron Sittig. He was my first real design mentor. And he was kind of giving me some feedback on my work, and he was like, kind of feels like you're putting a lot of your personality into your work. And I was like, well, what do you mean? And he's like, what we're trying to do on Facebook is, we want to be a platform for people to share their stuff. And we want to make it, and the way to think about it is, if we're successful, someone logs into Facebook and they see, their friends. They see names that they recognize. They see photos that feel familiar to them. And our job is to kind of get out of the way. And that's kind of how we should approach our job as designers, because we're not designing for ourselves. We're designing for all of these people who are using our product. And that was the first lesson that I learned about designing for people at scale. It's not about personal expression. It's not about what I wanted to say and what my aesthetic was and what I thought was cool or not cool or trendy or not trendy. It's about trying to focus it on what do we want other people's experience to be. Okay, so let's fast forward a few years, and now we are in 2013. And so this is a picture of me and Mark and some of our colleagues, and we're announcing a project that I'd worked on and that I was really, really excited about. And internally, we called this project Newsstand. And what it was is a big redesign of our desktop website. And what we wanted to do was kind of make it a lot more modern, a lot more visual. People were uploading more and more photos, and we wanted you to really have that and feel immersive and rich. And also, I was using a really beautiful cinema display. And before, our website was like optimized for 800 by 600 resolution, so it kind of showed up tiny. And we're like, this is our chance to kind of step into the future and make it much bigger and more visual. And we had been using this for a really, really long time internally, and we all loved it. We thought this was a really great design. We were proud to put it out there. So we launched it to a small percentage of people at first because we wanted to understand, were there any bugs? Let's fix them before we go, have this out for everyone. And unfortunately, we kind of got this rude surprise, because every single way that we had of measuring and knowing whether this was a good design told us that it wasn't. People wrote in and they were like, I hate that you changed it. Why are you changing this stuff on me? Stop doing that. Our new navigation system, which we thought was so awesome, people were using it less. They weren't actually going and exploring as many parts of the site as they used to. People were scrolling newsfeed less. They were looking at less stories. They were commenting less. They were visiting Facebook less. Every single thing you could possibly think of, it was bad. And so internally, everybody was like, oh my God, this is terrible. Roll it back, roll it back. And I'm like, no, there must be some mistake, something, we have to understand what's happening. I'm sure that there is a bug somewhere in our code that is somehow rendering the performance of this to be 30% slower, and that's why we're seeing all this, bad results, right? It's we gotta just find what the bug is. And so we spent a really long time. We spent, months and months trying to decompose the problem and trying to understand what is actually going on. And the answer was really surprising, because it turns out all of us at Facebook are using our gorgeous, high-quality cinema displays, but that is not what most of the world is using. Most of the world is using, a not super high-end desktop computer, 1024 by 768 resolution, it's in super high performance. And then they load this thing, and it's you can't even see a full newsfeed story on screen without scrolling. Because we had made these stories big and immersive, and they just didn't really fit if you have a small, kind of window. And so when we actually realized that and we played with that experience, it's yeah, this isn't good, So we ended up moving to a design that took into account, it's got to work really, really well for 1024 by 768 resolution. And this is the version that we ended up shipping. And afterwards, actually, a lot of people in the design community were just sort of like, I don't understand why you didn't do that. You guys had such a bold design. Like, were you like afraid? Were you not ready to kind of step into the future? And that's the second lesson, that I took away. I wrote an article about kind of what we had learned through the process. But the second lesson that I took away is like, designing for people at scale is not about my experience or the experience of a small minority of people and the people who maybe have the best equipment and the highest end devices and live in the cities and the communities that I'm used to. It's about going out there and understanding kind of the audience at large and trying to figure out how we can do the best that we can for as many of those people as possible. Okay, so now fast forward a couple more years. This is just a couple years ago, 2015. Here's me and a bunch of designers on the team, and we're hovering art directors. And at the time, I was very much thinking about, and I very much deeply believe this today, that a lot of the superpower of design is around the North Star. It's about painting a vision for the future. Because all of us are very, very visual creatures. We can read an essay and we can like analyze and interpret numbers and sentences, but we all respond much quickly and much more emotionally and intuitively to images and to videos and to something that is expressive and visual. And as designers, like that's our work. And so that's why a lot of what we need to do is go out and create these visions for the future. And that's a lot of what I shared with my team and I talked a lot about. And so we did this a lot at Facebook. We'd have teams, they go off on a design sprint, and then they come back with like a really beautiful kind of product prototype video, something that looks like this. Like this is one of the Vision North Star videos that we had put together for our reactions feature that we launched about 1.5 years ago. And so day in and day out, we were getting these like awesome videos, images, but I kind of reflected on it and realized that something was missing. And it wasn't even at our company. It's like everywhere you look, this is a popular site, Dribble, you see images of beautiful products, right? These are the pixels that we're designing. This is our work. But what about the people? What about the story of the experience that we want people to have? What's happening before people get in and like start interacting with these screens? What are they thinking? What are they feeling? What even got them into the screen in the first place? And what about what happens afterwards? After someone has an interaction with the product, how do we want them to feel, and what do we want them to have taken away from that experience? And I felt like a lot of the ways that we were approaching, designing and putting out these vision videos, it was so focused on the pixels and the work. But that's sort of my third lesson. Designing for people at scale isn't about the pixels. It's not about actually the end product at all that we're building. It's about how that plays in context with the experience, the end-to-end experience that people are having. And that's the thing that we care about. That's the thing we want to actually write a vision and a narrative and kind of look into the future about. So all this led us to reflect a bit and come up with a framework to kind of think about how we do design at Facebook. And now it's basically one of the things that we ask in all of our product reviews, and it's terminology that's thrown around whenever we're kicking off a new design project. And it's these 3 questions that we want to keep asking ourselves or ask our colleagues whenever we see their work. And the questions are, the first one is, what people problem are we solving? And the operative word here is people, because of course as designers we're always solving problems. But a lot of how I myself have talked about the problems or hear other people talk about the problems, it's very easy to have it be like us-centric, our team-centric, our company-centric. We need to be profitable. We need to increase user engagement. We need to improve the click-through rate of this experience from like 5% to 25%. These are not people problems. These are not the things that if you go out and you ask someone on the street about, like what they want and what they want you to build for them, they're not talking about like your company's profitability. And so it doesn't work for us to start and try and solve our own internal problems. We need to actually focus on, well, what do the clients want? What do the customers want? What do the people, the audience that we're trying to build for? What are they experiencing and what problems are they having? The second question is, well, how do we know this is a real problem? Because again, very, very easy for us. I've done this 1,000 times where I'm like, I got a great idea, and I go and sketch it out and I design it out, and then I sort of try and be like, and this isn't a great idea, and you kind of back your way into a problem. But let's start first with the people problem, and then let's ask ourselves, well, we're smart people, we're talented people, but we have limited time, we have limited energy. Are we focusing on the problems that are most deserving of our time and energy and the choices that we want to make? Going back to the newsstand example, it wasn't really, it's like we don't want to just design for like a small group of people like me who have the best high-end devices. We want to design for as many people in the world as possible. So let's focus on that. Let's focus on understanding who those people are and making sure that we're focused on the most important real problems. And finally, the third question is, how do we know if we've solved this problem? Super important to ask this up front before you've designed anything and before you've launched a thing. Because I can tell you right now, we're all biased. And so after you launch something and the results start going in, we're all hyper-tuned to try and look for the positive signals. Because we want to know that, we want to kind of tell ourselves that we did a good job. And so that's why this question has to come in the very, very beginning, because that's one of the only ways I've found that we can be truly objective. To ask ourselves, let's wave a magic wand and assume everything we did just turned out perfectly, right? Beyond our wildest dreams. What's different about the world? What's different about people's experiences? What's different about what they're talking about? How will we know if the thing that we built actually mattered? So I want to share, now an example of kind of how we've applied that framework into our product development process and how we approach designing now. So how many of you guys have heard of Facebook groups, the feature? Cool. So in the beginning, this is actually kind of like one of those things that we kind of built very quickly and put out there. And we would see a lot of groups that would get really big, and we would be like, nice job, like, look, this group is growing like crazy. It's got over 2 million people, but they would all be groups kind of this variety. I will go slightly out of my way to step on a crunchy-looking leaf. People joined the group because they wanted that association, on their profile, right? So it was like, oh yeah, that's like a part of my identity. I self-identify as somebody who likes stepping on crunchy-looking leaves. But, you'd kind of go into the group and like nothing was happening. Like it's crickets, it was like very, very silent. I mean, this isn't a thing that you really discuss and have a lot of like, spirited back and forth over. So a lot of these groups would pop up and then like nothing would happen. And then like, frankly, they wouldn't actually be like that important. But there were groups that were like actual like vibrant communities, where people would discuss things and share things and would be like very active and like Julie earlier talked about AIGA and how the goal here is to be a community, be a vibrant community of designers. And so when we reflected on it, when we asked ourselves like, well, what's the point of groups? Before, we were looking at a lot of these metrics like number of groups created or average number of members in a group or even like things like how many posts were in the group. But we realized, well, what's the purpose? It's not these numbers, it's not these metrics. Like the thing that would make us feel like we were successful and we built a great product is if, frankly, it helped people build communities and meaningful connections. So that means if we went out and we interviewed every single person and we said, hey, do you use Facebook groups? And they're like, yeah. And we say, well, is it important to you? Like, do you find it meaningful? then the answer would be yes. And the feeling that we wanted is, we had seen in kind of a couple examples in here and there, and I'll share with you guys a video of what I mean.
Biculture is very male-dominated. In the old days, I had beer cans thrown at me, cigarettes thrown at me, run off the road because I was a lady biker. For my whole life, I've never seen two women ride together. I would see one woman just riding by herself everywhere, and I thought, I wonder what she's doing. I started Lady Bikers of California to bring more women riders together. We get on our group and we post, I'm gonna go for a ride, the sun's beautiful, anybody wanna ride with me? And within 15 minutes, you've got, where do you wanna meet? There's ladies that have been riding alone like me for 50 years, and now they have best friends to ride with. I think that it gives them a feeling of not only empowerment, but of sisterhood. There's nothing these ladies wouldn't do for each other. When we ride together, it's this. Riding in a group is a euphoria, and to be in the middle of it is a really beautiful sight. I always go to tear up because some of these women, they're beat down to hell in their life, and they join the group, and I watch them become themselves. Each day they ride, they're stronger. You can even see the glow in their faces that I'm in charge. This is mine. I'm doing this.
So that's the feeling that we wanted. That's what we want the group's product to be about. And that's how we would know if we're successful. If more people have stories like Terry and the community that she's created. Earlier this year, looking at and reflecting on the work of groups, we decided to change Facebook's mission. Previously, it was about making the world more open and connected. And we wanted to think about, well, if the world is connected, what then? Like, what does it ladder up to? Like, what do connected people trying to do together? And the answer was build community and try and bring the world a little bit closer together. And this has changed a lot of how we've approached the product development process. Earlier this year, we hosted our first ever community summit, where we went out and we asked folks like Terry and other community leaders who had created some of the most active and meaningful groups on Facebook. And we gathered them together. This is a photo of Chris Clare, who's the design leader for groups. And we just wanted to listen to them. We wanted to hear them tell us, what were their goals in starting these communities, and what was working for them, and what wasn't working for them, and how are their members feeling, and how are they, thinking about like why they want to get up every day and do this work. And based on that, that's what we wanted to build our product roadmap off of. So since then, we've worked on features that we've heard directly from admins that are important to them. One admin told us a story about how they spend hours every single day, 2 or 3 hours, just going through the list of people who had requested to join their group. Because a lot of these admins wanted to make sure that their community was healthy and vibrant, and so they wanted to make sure people joined who actually would benefit from the group and wouldn't be trolls and wouldn't be kind of spammers and using it for other purposes. And so they asked us for tools that would make it easier for them to get the signal that they needed on whether this person was somebody who would be a great member for their community. They told us they wanted better tools to deal with bad actors. So if somebody posted something, was harassing, they wanted a lot of options for how you ban them and then delete all their posts and do all of that in one go. They asked us for tools that would let them better understand their community. Who was joining, where were they from, who are the folks who have been really active, who have been supporting the community, so that they could go out and send personal messages thanking a lot of those folks. And we have a lot more work to do. This is only a very, very small step in trying to make sure that the things that we're doing, the things that we're designing, are laddering up to some greater purpose and actually helping people build vibrant communities. So we have a lot of posters at Facebook, and if you go into our campus, we have a lot of things that talk about our values and the events that are going on, and stories about people using our platform. And this is my favorite one, which is the thing that I'll end with. The journey is 1% finished. I think it's a great reminder for all of us as designers, with our power to try and imagine and paint a picture for the future that we want. There are so many people problems out there that are waiting for us to uncover and do our research and listen and empathize and hear, and then come up with good solutions with, a lot of which won't work, and then we learn and we iterate and we go back to the drawing board. But I just see so much opportunity, and I see so much more that we can do to try and make sure that the products that we're putting out there solve real people problems and have the impact that we want. Thank you all so much.
Thank you so much. So, Facebook's in the news a bit.
Yes, it has been.
So let's talk a little bit about that. So the strength of Facebook, as I see it, is that it's for a lot of people, it's for the masses, but each individual has this unique experience to them. And this is really profound. I think this is why it all kind of works. However, this is a feature that gets exploited when there's like politically divisive ads and they're targeted towards a bad actor or a racist person or whatever, but that ad is not seen by a lot of other people to kind of, call out it being false or gross or racist or whatever. So how do you reconcile the strength of that and the weakness of that as a designer?
Yeah, I think this is obviously a super profound and a deep topic for us, and it's one of the things that we're doing a lot of, having a lot of hard conversations and doing a lot of soul searching around, because I think it's kind of our bias as designers. Like a lot of times, we're imagining our products, right? And frankly, we're generally imagining the best cases.
You're not imagining Russian trolls.
Yeah, like you're like, oh, I'm gonna create groups, and then like people can go and share like their baby photos and like support each other, and like that's the picture that we have, right? And in a lot of ways, all of us who are working as designers, we tend to be optimists. A lot of technologists are optimists, and frankly, looking back, I think that's a mistake, and we can't just only ever be thinking about the best case scenario. And I think for us, that's a lot of the conversation that we've been having internally, is that we have to do better. We have to. We have a huge responsibility on this platform that over 2 billion people are using. And we need to be looking at both the best case scenarios and designing for the worst case scenarios. We have to be looking for the worst case scenarios and dealing with them.
How do you imagine the worst case scenario?
How do you imagine? Well, some of the things that we're trying are like, cool, we want to make it so that people in the community, it's sort of how like a lot of times you can hire like a team of people who will like hack into your code base, right? Yeah, like the white hat hackers, so that they can tell you what your vulnerabilities are and you can like go and patch them, right? Right. I think we need that as well, on the content side and on the ways.
14-year-old 4chan kid.
Yeah, I think we need. Well, I think we also need, kind of a different process. Like it's even the conversation when we think about building products. It's like, cool, we ask our 3 questions, and then one of the other things that we probably should ask is like, well, what are the ways, and have you thought about the ways in which, a bad actor could potentially misuse this feature? Right. Like, have we thought about that? And how are we going to put in, safeguards or policies or other things to make sure that this doesn't, it doesn't lead to a lot of this later on, like an issue or like a bad experience that somebody else could have.
Right. When you started, you've been there a long time at this point, where the product has really changed. The influence is really just outsized. It's like hard to imagine the influence of Facebook in the world. And I just want to know what that feels like when every little moment is a really big deal. Like, decisions you guys make affect a lot of things, and who knows what they affected in the election or whatever it is. How do you wrap your mind around that when you create things? I need to.
I think somebody once told me, an anecdote where it was like, it's very hard for like a human mind to comprehend, honestly, like more than like, a room full, like a couple thousand, like it's like even imagining 1 million people or like 100 million or like let alone 1 billion people in a room, like it's just, our minds can't really process that. And so I've thought about that a lot, and I think, one of the things that we, over the past, couple of years have really invested in to a much stronger degree is research. Like we truly need to understand the needs and the lives of different groups on Facebook that where people may have habits and daily lives that like look very different from like what I'm going through, and so how will we know that unless we go out and we talk to them and we like send designers and researchers and engineers out into the field and we actually talk with these people and we create that dialogue, right? And I think I was talking about the community summit, but that's one example of where like this admin community is really important for us to truly better understand and serve. And so we need to go out and pinpoint what are groups or buckets of these types of people and actually then go out and talk to them. And that's the only way I think we can go and over time develop that empathy, because it isn't enough to just look at like a number on a dashboard and just be like, oh, well, I guess 2 million people, did this or said this. Like, I think we have to go and actually go deeper.
Thank you so much. Julie Zhou, everybody.
Thank you.